Hey, good morning, seventh graders. How are you doing today? This is our video for the next week of distance learning. Today we're going to be looking at echinoderms. Now you're going to be taking a test this week also, so hopefully you watch this video before you take the test because this will have some stuff that's going to be covered on the test on it, as well as this video at the end is going to tell you about how you can get some extra credit on the test. And so if you watch this PowerPoint all the way through, because that's what it is this week. It is a PowerPoint. You will be able to get some extra credit on your test. I hope you're all doing well. Miss you a lot. And let's get started on talking about echinoderms. Echinoderms are our last group of invertebrates. And next week, we're going to start getting into the vertebrates. So, what are echinoderms? Well, they are invertebrates, as I said, and they have an internal skeleton, not an exoskeleton like some of our other invertebrates have had. And what makes echinoderms special is that they have a system of fluid-filled tubes inside their bodies that are called a water vascular system. And it's really cool. What it does is it pumps water through their body. And when the water gets to certain areas, it allows them to do special things, which we'll be getting to in a moment. Here are some examples of echinoderms. Sea cucumbers. Now, they look like actual cucumbers, except grosser. Okay, how'd you like that on your plate? But that is a sea cucumber, and if you see all those little projections coming off of it, that's their tube feet, which is where the vascular system sends water to allow them to be like suction cups. So that is a sea cucumber. It looks kind of like maybe something that your dog might have done in the front yard. Okay, not being gross anymore, let's look at the second type of echinoderm, sea stars. Now, sea stars, most of you are familiar with sea stars, and some people call them starfish. That is not a proper name for the sea stars because they are not fish at all. They are not even close to being fish. So people call them starfish, but their proper name should be sea stars. One of the most amazing things about sea stars is that if you cut off one of their legs, or whatever you want to call these projections, if you cut one off and you throw it away, it grows into another sea star. True story. Years ago, one of the little seas over in England, the sea stars were overpopulating the lake or the sea. And so some of the fishermen went out and they started cutting up the sea stars and throwing them back in because they thought they killed them. Well, what happened is they ended up actually making it even more populated because all of the legs that they cut off started turning into more sea stars. So they are a very resilient group. The third group, or the third example of an echinoderm, would be the sea urchin. Sea urchins look a lot like a porcupine or a stress ball with needles on it. Some of them are very pretty colors. That's a very pretty pink. But those are little spines on the sea urchin. And then the fourth type of example of echinoderms would be the sand dollar. And there's an example of a sand dollar. And yes, sand dollars do have that flower looking drawing on them. Okay, that is not somebody carving that into them. That's how God made them. And so those are the four examples of echinoderms before we get started. Now don't let that confuse you because there's four main groups of echinoderms, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit. All right. All echinoderms live in salt water. So that means they are not found naturally occurring in Wisconsin because Wisconsin, we do not have saltwater rivers or lakes or streams. We have fresh water. Salt water is like the Great Salt Lake in Utah or the ocean. Okay. So all echinoderms live in salt water. So again, if you go to the lake and you say, hey, Mr. B, I saw a sea cucumber, I'm going to tell you that you are not correct because they don't live in fresh water. Okay? All right. What kind of symmetry then do echinoderms have? Well, most of them have radial symmetry. Remember, radial symmetry is organized around a center where no matter what angle you cut it at, it's going to kind of be the same. Okay? Echinoderms, their water vascular system extends into their arms to force water into their tubes. which is their tube feet. And when they are filled with water, they act like suction cups. I'm sure many of you have had toys in the past with little suction cups on them. And when you stick them to the wall or something, they stick there. That's a suction cup. Well, that's what echinoderms have for their tube feet. They're like suction cups. If they stick onto something, they will stick to it. Okay? This causes them to move very slowly, because in order for them to move, they have to be able to take all their suction cups off and move them a little bit forward. Take all their suction cups off and move themselves forward. This also, though, allows them to capture their food, and it makes it difficult for the food to get away because they're suctioned on, and it allows for them to rip open their food. One of the coolest things in the animal kingdom is when the sea star catches a clam and it wants a meal. Well, the sea star does not eat the shell. It wants what's inside the clam. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever gone to the lake or to a beach and found a clam and tried to open it. They're very difficult to open. But what the sea star does is it takes its suction cups and it puts its 5 legs around the clam, and it starts to, with its suction power, pull it open. They're extremely strong, and they pull it open, and then their stomach, this is really gross, their stomach starts to come out of their body and go into the clam part that the sea star just ripped open and start to digest the clam, and then the clam dies. So they take their 5, whatever you want to call them, fingers or projections or arms, and they wrap it around the clam. They suction to rip it open. Their stomach comes out of their body. It goes into the clam and eats the clam from the inside out. Pretty cool stuff in the animal kingdom. Okay? All right, reproduction of echinoderms. Well, they reproduce externally, meaning outside of the body. The female releases her eggs into, for lack of a better word, a nest. It's really not a nest. Echinoderms don't make nests like birds or rabbits, but they do lay their eggs in an area, and then the male echinoderm comes along and releases sperm around them. He does not have internal fertilization with the female. So therefore, these are fertilized outside of the body, which we said is called external fertilization. The fertilized eggs, when they quote unquote hatch, turn into a swimming larva. They look nothing like the adult echinoderm. So then, as they are swimming around, they undergo a complete metamorphosis where they become the adult that they look like, either a sea star, a sea urchin, a sea cucumber, etc. Okay? Now, as I said at the beginning, there are 4 main groups of echinoderms. 3 of them I showed you pictures of already. The 4th one I have a picture here for you. The first group is called the sea stars. Well, sea stars eat mollusks, which we talked about before last video, which was clams and things like that. They eat crustaceans, which are like lobsters and crayfish, and other echinoderms. So sea stars are big-time meat eaters. The brittle stars are the second group. And brittle stars look like that. They basically look like a starfish, but they're not a starfish. Okay? They have long, wispy arms. Their arms do not have suction cups on them. And their arms are what they use to slither with a wispy motion. So they will flick their arms in the water, which allows them to propel along. That is the brittle stars. So the first group of echinoderms, the sea stars. The second group, the brittle stars. The third one is the sea urchins, which we showed you a picture of earlier. Sea urchins have no arms. Okay? And then the final group, which we mentioned earlier, is also the sea cucumbers. These use their tube feet to crawl, and sea cucumbers are actually filter feeders. If you remember when we talked about clams, filter feeders means the sea cucumbers open up their mouth and water flows in and flows out and flows in and flows out and flows in and flows out. And when the water flows in and it finds some nutrients that it wants, it takes them and keeps them in its body and lets the rest of it flow back out. That is filter feeding. So the 4 main groups of echinoderms. All right, extra credit on this test. For extra credit on this week's test, along with submitting your test, at the bottom of the page, Write this down. We cannot find echinoderms living in bodies of water in Wisconsin. So if you watch this video and you write that down, you will get an extra point on your test. That is my reward to you for watching the video. If you write, we cannot find echinoderms living in bodies of water in Wisconsin, you will get an extra point on your test. So that is the end of our PowerPoint. Once again, stay safe, stay happy. We will be together soon, whether it's this year or next year, but we will be together. I miss you all. If you need anything, send me a line. Some of you have been giving me prayer requests, and I appreciate that. Some of you have been asking me how I'm doing. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the prayers and all the comments. So you guys have a great day. God bless. See you next week.